true to what you said on paper.
I wish that I could freely dream and be judged from within, haunted by a power that can.
Yes, you are. Good morning. Welcome back to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. That is Dr. Bradley. He has snuck in here, folks.
I'm sorry.
He listening to At the
I
Round
realize
Table.
I may have a hot mic here.
And it's hot, too. How many times have people gotten in trouble? Oh, is my mic on? It's been on for the last 10 minutes. Yeah. You listen at the Round Table with MAMLEO. We want to thank our sponsor, the Cruise Construction. Building opportunities here in the Boston area. Also want to thank the Money Store. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call at area code 508-345-4726. That's 508-345-4726. Like I said, you are listening to the Round Table of MAMLEO. If you want to give us a call here, the caller number here is 617-282-0685, 617-282-0685. Also a reminder, today, Saturday, May 3rd, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. It's the Move and Groove Festival. It's going to be held at the MLK Junior Boulevard at 120 MLK Boulevard, Roxbury, Mass. Join the family-friendly fun at the Roxbury community. Let me start all over, folks. It's early. Today, Move and Groove Festival, Saturday, May 3rd. I don't know who wrote this copy. From 12 to 4 p.m. It's going to be held at the MLK Family, what is the name? What's the location? Okay. All right. We'll go on. Also, May 22nd from 6 to 7:30 p.m., the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office is holding a town hall presented by Suffolk County Kevin Hayden. It's going to be May 22nd from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Bruce Bowling Building, 2300 Washington Street. That is the school department's headquarters there. Right in Nubian Square. Like I said, that's May 22nd from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Bruce Bowling Building. That's coming up in a couple of weeks, so you want to get involved with that, feel free to do so. And without further, come on in. Good morning. How are you? And our guest has arrived.
Good morning.
Good morning. Wow. Roach, she smell much better than you.
Well, man, you put the brother on blast, man. Excuse me, young lady. You want to switch? I'm gonna kid.
You brought in food, he'd be gone.
I'm gonna kid.
Nah, so Roach, you want to introduce our guest?
Yes, everyone, welcome, Jacqueline. I don't want to mispronounce it. Fonseca.
We had some Fonsecas in the police department.
Yeah,
really?
exactly.
Tony Fonseca.
I've heard the name, but I'm not
Okay,
familiar.
because that's not a common name, Fonseca.
Yeah, it's not.
Cape Verdean.
Yes,
Yeah, it is Cape Verdean.
Yeah.
Tony was good people. He just passed away, didn't he?
Not too long ago, Domingo Montero just passed away.
Yeah, I heard that while I was in Chicago.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to hear
This
that.
will be on May 7th. We'll put that out there. Also, want to remind
You want to put that out there? I want to attend that. He was in my
I'll
academy
send
class.
you the,
Well, she's from the Harriet Tubman Project, and then that's why I invited her to speak today. So if you want to get closer and introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Good morning.
I actually met Rhodes during an Uber ride.
Yes.
And we got into talking about criminal justice system. I'm not sure why, but it was a fruitful conversation. And I introduced myself and a little bit about what I do.
Okay.
So thank you for inviting me.
Well, you know, I'm saying, Rose, it's not a good idea when your customer gets in the car and they start talking to you about criminal justice.
Take it from a police officer.
Something alarming. You know?
Yeah, take it from two former police officers.
Okay.
You know, that's not. You know, I mean, you might want to stop searching your pockets, man.
And your first name again is?
My name is Jacqueline.
Jacqueline, you don't mind if we call you Jacqueline?
I don't mind at all.
Because this is a family-friendly show.
I
So,
appreciate it.
when I was first thinking about the Harriet Tubman, I was thinking about the Harriet Tubman house that used to be down at Columbus and that. But this is not the Harriet Tubman house, because I'm like, man, that was the last vestige we had down there that we could go and have a little stake in
The South
End.
Yes.
We've been displaced.
Yeah.
So our listening audience, is this for us?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So tell our listening audience a little bit more about what this is and how it came about.
Thank you.
If you wouldn't
Sure,
mind.
things. So the Harriet Tubman Project is a grassroots organization that was actually started behind the wall at MCI Norfolk. And what they do behind the wall is they teach legal literacy to those that are incarcerated, with a focus around wrongful conviction, the intersectionality of the criminal justice system, and structural racism. So the guys behind the wall are learning how to best advocate for themselves by learning the language of the law, because it's very difficult to navigate the criminal court system when you don't understand the language. It's like any other language. If I don't speak Spanish, I can't successfully navigate myself through a town where everyone speaks Spanish. So it's quite similar to that, where they learn the language of the law in order to better understand their case and how they were wrongfully convicted. So the Harriet Tubman Project's been around since 2021. I got involved in 2023 on the outside to add advocacy and liaison. So the guys meet, actually, Mr. Pastor Hobbs, I got a pleasure to meet you at the State House. And I know you go into MCI Norfolk with not Minister Randy, but Representative Russell Holmes. And the guys meet with Representative Russell Holmes and his guests once a month, first Saturday of every month. Actually, today. And they learn about civic engagement. And these guys are brilliant. They've learned how to write bills. They've learned how to pass law. They have testified at the legislative hearings from prison through Zoom. They have successfully done so much, and we give them credit along with the Keeping Families Together Coalition and the No Cost Call Coalition for why we're able to have free calls from the prisons today, which is impactful for family members that were funding those calls.
And then, do you understand that the criminal justice system, unfortunately, for some people, it's actually a cash cow, and they use the criminality and the fact that people are being convicted in the warehouse as a way for them, as a means for them to generate profits.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the things where
the 13th Amendment was established, right, and that allows the only time, and then it's the only population where we're overrepresented, right, is in the criminal justice system. We know that. Dr. Brad and I, former law enforcement, we saw that, even when you are in communities where our population isn't reflected, we're still overrepresented in who gets arrested. So I'm glad to see you guys doing this work, and I was going to say, because you and Pastor Hobbs must have crossed paths somewhere,
Absolutely.
but clearly you have. But what's staggering to me, I'm looking at these figures, because I thought it was much lower than that. You're saying the annual cost to house one inmate for different facilities in Massachusetts, for instance, MCI, Souza Baranowski, $164,000 per inmate
Per person, correct.
Per person. So if we put that into perspective, that's per year.
yes.
Yeah.
So imagine using a quarter of that to send them to college.
That's my exact sentiments.
Right.
Is we can really reduce the incarcerated population if we're investing in them in the beginning instead of at the end.
So basically, I think it's an inefficient use of funds.
Oh, absolutely.
So Dr. Bradley, what does it cost? You're a professor at Curry and other institutions, right? What does it cost to attend Curry College a year? Is it $164,000?
No, it's
That's
not really approaching that,
$164,000.
but it's up there. But my question is this: in your dealings in the institutions, what is the demographic that's most represented in that population?
So the Hispanic population comes first, and then we have our African Americans.
So where would the white male population be on that scale?
It's a lot lower, but also when you look at what the crimes are, the crimes that the black and brown folks are incarcerated for more than likely are less violent. So there are a lot of drug crimes and property crimes and domestic things like that. And then the crimes start to get a little crazier when we.
So I bring that up for two reasons. But my first reason is that that's where your resistance will come from. Is that if when you're beginning to educate folks, when you're educating our people, it becomes, well, we're not giving this to them for free. All right. And the other piece is that when this guy talks about criminals and getting criminals, homegrown criminals, to go to places like El Salvador or Venezuela, that is because he wants them out of the country and they cannot be exposed to people like you or me who can educate them. My next question, and I'll be short on this, how can someone like myself, who's a professor in criminal justice, help you?
Great question. Thank you for asking. So as you heard earlier, we have legislators that go into the prisons and bring guests. So it's always great to see representation from yourself for the men, and also just collaboration. So we do a lot of work on the outside where we go to schools and we educate the students from different ages, whether it be middle school, high school, all the way into college, where we're looking for volunteers. We're still a grassroots organization. It started behind the wall with no funding, of course. So Ricky Fuquan McGee is the founder of the Harriet Tubman Project. He's been incarcerated wrongfully for over, it's going to be 28 years now. So he started the program just by his own love and passion for overturning his own case and then passing that literacy on to others.
Okay.
So we do this from the passion of our heart. We have no funding, and we're always looking for volunteers.
Okay.
So any students that we educate, we look to hopefully get them to participate as well.
Okay. I'm looking at your curriculum, and being one who this is the curriculum here, right?
Not necessarily. So the curriculum is on the inside, and we can certainly get that out here.
Okay.
But there's it's actually a legal class. So these guys are learning the law.
Okay.
617-282-0685,
We should talk about it.
617-282-0685. Listen at the round table with MAMLEO. I think, what Dr. Bradley was saying, it's important because Dr. Bradley and I both are retired law enforcement. He was a deputy superintendent, one of the part of the leadership team with the Boston Police Department. I retired as a detective. But we were both former presidents of the Massachusetts Association of Minority Law Enforcement, MAMLEO, which is a large population. We're actually right there at Columbia Road. And I think, and Dr. Bradley, I think you will agree, it would be great to have you come in and address our membership, those of our members who are still active as well as not just our retirees, so people understand. And I think this is this environment that people are now, especially when we see the Orange Man, and you know who I'm talking about, pardoning all these folks who don't look like, for committing crimes. There's
actual
no question
crimes,
about
yes,
whether
yes.
or not they're guilty or innocence. They were convicted, and a lot of them pled to their crimes. And yet we know that our folks a lot of times are in jail for lesser crimes.
It's
or
because of what they look like. That's why they're in jail.
I mean, the Central Park Five comes back to mind where these young men were not guilty, but
Again, they were forcefully,
Right.
false confessions, and again, misconception and the miscarriage of justice. Well, it's not even justice; it was miscarriage of prejudice. Because they didn't actually do an investigation. If they had, those boys wouldn't end up there. But one of the reasons why when we spoke and it got my attention was she said 90% of all the people that the cases were overturned were of black men.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Probably
that
higher.
blew my. I was like, "What?" She said, "Yeah."
So what is, like, when you're talking to these folks who are behind the wall, what is the education level? Because I know there are studies that show that the education level depends a lot on how you can defend and advocate for yourself, and a lot of times these folks have public defenders where they've got to stack this high. Does that come into consideration or a factor in these cases?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the guys behind the wall, they might be picking up a book for the first time at the Harriet Tubman Project.
Okay.
So we think about Harriet herself, right? And she was illiterate. She was born into slavery. She didn't read or write. She had a disability. She was 5'2", black woman.
Yeah. Oh, we know Harriet to have a teacher.
Absolutely.
Could've freed more slaves if they
I
did.
knew they were slaves.
Exactly. So she had to educate herself along the way, and along the journey, she, created a lot of partnerships and learned things that she may not have had before in order to make these journeys back and forth. So a lot of these guys, because of their circumstance of being enslaved mentally and physically, they're meeting with each other and they're trying to figure out how to get themselves out of enslavement, again, mentally and physically. So we have guys, and this isn't exclusive to African Americans. The Harriet Tubman Project is open to anyone that wants to go and join. So we have guys that are learning English through the law, which is powerful. They're learning case law, they're learning statutes, limitations, they're learning so many intricate, very detailed things about the criminal justice system in English. Or just, again, picking up a book for the first time. So the mental shift is quite important before we can have a physical shift of transitioning out of the
So
prison
But
system.
see, one of the things, may I, because I'm over 60, it doesn't reside.
That's why the light came on.
You see what kind of abuse I get here? But one of the things that I have found in my teachings is that there's a misinterpretation or lack of understanding of how the law how the law is operationalized in policing. I don't know if I said it correctly, but in other words, there's a misunderstanding at the population level of how police officers operate to introduce them to the criminal justice system.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't, and you guys are both former officers, police officers don't get as much legal literacy. They don't know the law as well as the attorneys do. So when you have law enforcement that is in the streets, it's good to understand the law in depth.
Well, I don't necessarily concur with that statement. What I would say is that the police officer doesn't know the entire, how the law will be administered in the court as well as the attorney.
Exactly.
But he knows how to get the individual using
The elements
that law
of the
in
crime
the
is usually what
we're operating on.
And then, you know, and you have how it's put into play, right? And how, you know, the different amendments, right? The different constitutional. We're not scholars on constitutional law. A lot of times that's where, because if it's not applied every day, right? There's like, for instance, when I worked in the drug unit, that's all I did was drug work. So I kind of lost sight of, like, if I pulled someone over, I'm like, what's the chapter and section for this? Because I haven't written a citation in forever, you know. So in that way, I think you're definitely spot on. But I want to also pivot a little bit. Because, you know, it sounds like what you all are doing is for folks who are already incarcerated behind the wall.
Yes.
How do we, because I always say, how do we be a little bit more proactive, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's two ways, though. I think it's two hits. I agree with you. How do we be more proactive? But how do we be more proactive in getting them who are released from actually going back behind the wall?
Well, but also that I'm putting a lot on your plate. But I guess what I want to add to that is because I was watching Nightline. This is going back, you're really relatively young, and Jesse Jackson was on, and he was talking to Ted Koppel, and he was saying, you know, when people get in prison, you know, they've got access to computers and all this stuff. And he said, well, wouldn't it be better if they had access to it before they got in there, right? Yes. Because maybe they wouldn't be here. So that's what I'm saying is, like, how do we get people more educated about this before they go behind the walls? Because it's harder to apply it once you're there. You're a captive audience. You have more time to deal with it. But educating people out here of what you might be going through if you get caught up in this.
For sure, and I think that's a great question. So some of the work that I do on the outside is workshops with the youth. Again, we middle school or high school age youth, and we educate them about what these guys are going through. So what I would do is I would come to a workshop with someone that was formerly incarcerated, and we will play it out. So joint venture is one of the biggest things that have lynched many men for one crime. Bless you. So, for example, if there is a crime, and let's say you're in a car with 4 of your friends, and no one's taking responsibility for that crime or that gun charge, everyone's going down for the same charge, whether they can prove it or not. So we have so many men that were convicted for life without parole for first-degree murder charges, and they were just there. So we teach the youth about how to avoid being in those situations and what that looks like, and just really choosing your friends wisely. And we do it in the factor of having those that have gone through it. I've never been incarcerated, so I bring my brothers in that have to share their story, and then again we play it out. We play out what a bank robbery would look like, and someone that's just in the car that didn't even step foot into the bank, and how they can be charged with the same charge as the person that may have pulled the trigger at a botched robbery. So there's different ways to do it. We're still getting creative about it because it started behind the wall, so I'm introducing the element of the outside preventative services.
So you said, I heard you say men. Does this also spill over to women?
Oh,
or is it just-
absolutely.
okay.
Women are just not
because
as...
we're seeing those numbers increase behind the wall.
Yeah, they're just not as well represented, and I think the Families Justices Healing organization in Roxbury does an incredible job advocating for the women in the Free Her movement. But I work primarily with the men because we're at Norfolk, but I think a great example is a lot of young women are in relationships where they're putting rental cars under their names. They are holding things in their home, drugs, guns, what have you, for men, and they are being charged for the things that their counterparts are doing. And if they don't, quote unquote, snitch, they're going down as well. So it's really, and what I take pride in as a woman is really educating the young ladies that we're in workshops with on exactly what that looks like.
Right. So let me ask you a question. So you're doing this. You said it's all volunteer. Is it a full-time volunteer, or how is this working? Because it seems like it's a full-time commitment.
Yes, it is.
But you don't have the infrastructure for a full-time staffing because everyone's volunteering. Is that fair to say, or how does that work for you?
Yes, so it is a full-time commitment. So I'm working the Harriet Tubman Project at all hours of the day or night because it is my life. I'm directly impacted as well. My fiance is incarcerated and has been incarcerated for over 28 years now.
Oh, wow.
So I got involved in this work through him, and he and I work, all day and night on getting him out. So that's a factor of the Harriet Tubman Project. It's my life. But it is technically just something that is part-time until we can have funding and we can really have a full-time staff. But we try to encourage those that are most directly impacted by the criminal justice system to be at the forefront of this fight.
So what assistance, if any, are you getting from our elected officials? Have any of them joined in this effort? And also about educating, Dr. Bradley shaking his head no. Also the public, because a lot of this, like Pastor Hobbs tries to get people registered and actually getting them to vote behind the walls. But we understand that if people don't make the connection, right, is a lot of the people who write the laws and things like that are elected to do so. But if we're not putting people in there who understand or educated about this, and the other side is saying just lock everyone up, like back when I first came on, it was the war on drugs, and it was just throw everybody in jail. And now we see the ramifications for that, even like with marijuana now, and it's legalized, they're trying to go back and roll it back a little bit if you were convicted of that. But there's still a lot of crimes related to drugs, and you're right, because a lot of folks are in there, a lot of those were mandatory sentences, and people are still serving them. How do we get people to make the connection where their votes and their elected officials have a huge impact? Your work probably wouldn't be as hard if you had some support there. They shy away from it, fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think the guys behind the wall do an incredible job of bringing more advocacy towards voters' rights, and they push, again, Representative Russell Holmes does an incredible job going in there. He brings different senators. He's brought Ayanna Pressley. So on the federal, state, and municipal level, we're engaging with elected officials, and the African American Coalition Committee at MCI Norfolk is doing that directly. So Alameen, Courtney Patterson, which is someone that's working behind the wall to push for voter registration behind the wall. That is something that they've been consistent in doing and showing up and educating us, the family members, on getting more involved.
I'm just alarmed by the total cost per.
That's what I was looking at this. I thought it was
per inmate.
The numbers go up every year as well.
I'm saying to myself, if we had
this budget,
actually, hold on. Let me say this. You have to multiply this by the number of individuals that are in
One
there.
person.
Yes.
So
Can you imagine?
if you look at MCI Norfolk, that's the female prison, that's which is the highest. It costs $227,500 to incarcerate one woman at MCI Norfolk. So it helps you understand why they're pushing to build a new prison for women. And women are underrepresented. There's not as many women incarcerated. So why are we pushing for $50 million facility to be opened up for a women's prison? Where are they going to get these women from? Right. And it makes sense when you look at the numbers. They're making the most money off.
What
of
did you
women.
said earlier is that it's been privatized. Like
yes,
but if you take this money
and reallocate it to education,
to other areas,
isn't it obvious?
Yes.
Where's the money coming from?
Exactly,
it's will be taxed. Yes,
exactly. Right. This is our money.
But again, it's benefiting a few people that are in control of it, and that's that 225.
This is the economical side of prisons, but it also goes back to the 13th Amendment.
Yes.
Because what tends to happen is that because of this, there's a pool of reduced labor.
Mm-hmm.
through these institutions. You know what I mean? And
Right.
capitalism can only work when you're getting a source of labor that's cheap.
Yes.
Because it's all about profit.
That's why we get most of our
Absolutely.
products from China.
China.
You know what
Because
I'm saying?
It's
Come
cheap
on,
labor
folks.
and people can't rebuff.
But the
being done
reverse
to them.
but the reverse side of this is the productivity of each of these individuals. Society's losing that productivity. So when you actually, that's one of the things that I took very seriously about being a police officer. When I introduce a person to the criminal justice system, not only am I depriving them of their liberty, but I'm also depriving society of the productivity that they will produce. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And now that productivity is taken out of the bucket, and that person is pulling from the bucket in the tune of $145,000,
Right.
per
Right.
year per person, out of that coffer. So the productivity is what we tend not to focus on.
Right.
Man, this is
617-282-0685. 617-282-0685. Listening to At the Round Table with the MAMLEO. In studio, Miss Fonseca. She is with the Harriet Tubman Project. Talking about wrongfully incarcerated men and women
Yes.
here in the Commonwealth. But I think also with, one of the things I found out, we talking about adding to this cost here, Dr. Bradley and folks, is that if you are incarcerated in these towns get to count you right on their census. So they're getting financial assistance
Yes.
on top of that. So there is a huge financial gain for Norfolk and even those
All these
folks-
towns that are out,
Right. They're not contributing anything other than
those
their
people don't live in
presence.
their, they don't live in their actual community, but they're getting the
And
benefits,
that
the
means
dollars.
If that person really resides in Dorchester
Yes.
or Roxbury,
Yes.
they're not getting funding
Yes, for those
for
people.
that person.
You
Yes.
nailed it. You nailed it. These. So you have Concord, Framingham, Norfolk, Gardner. They are profiting from these people.
Yeah.
So they pay them in order to be able to have these facilities.
Right.
And again, these are people coming up from Dorchester, Roxbury,
Right.
Mattapan. So we're losing our community, and it's the disparity.
So it loses
And it's,
productivity in the community.
and it's
There's no-
enriching the other
Right,
communities
there's no
that get
risk
to
to
house
them
them.
because
Yeah.
this person is behind the
Well,
wall. The
yeah.
likelihood that they're going to be causing any mayhem in their community
It's very low.
is
But
nil.
you know what? I tell you the other thing too is that there are societies throughout the world who handle incarceration entirely differently
Yeah.
than we do.
Let's go. I think like what Sweden, like the first thing they do is actually give them a kitten. When they, yeah, they do. They literally give them a kitten.
What I'm trying to say is that we need to take a look at how other people are actually doing this
Well,
in such a way that it
Because
can be
they
productive.
actually looking to rehabilitate them.
Correct.
Here we're not looking to rehabilitate
Right.
them.
Yeah.
Right. But one of the things, I don't know if you were listening when you came in, T. Michael Thomas, he called, and have you heard of the People's Academy?
Yes, I have.
That would be a perfect program for people coming out or even just people who aren't in there, right? When he's talking about what he's trying to do to get people to where they're making a living wage,
Yes.
not just, getting by, that plugging in this type of program with what he's doing over there with teaching people an apprenticeship, with the coppersmith and the aluminum. I'm just thinking, why aren't these things plugged in together so that it also gives people hope when they get out? Because you get out and you don't have opportunity. Some people come out of there with college degrees, but we know no one's going to hire you with a master's degree or a PhD if you just came from Norfolk institution.
Yeah, it's very challenging. I have been blessed enough to work with a lot of guys that are coming home and are doing incredible things. I have one gentleman we just helped with a vehicle that just got awarded a scholarship to Harvard and Yale. So it really depends. I think times are changing. I think that I see a lot more accessibility and inclusivity of those that are coming home because they're engaging with the community before they actually step foot out here. So a lot of that civic engagement is being done from behind the wall, which is changing the narrative of what it looks like to be incarcerated.
So you, if you don't mind sharing, you touched on that you have someone who you're intimately understanding because your boyfriend, your fiance is a victim of this, right? What brought the awareness to you? Did you meet him there, or was it you met this program?
Yeah. So he's actually calling now, and he's the founder of the Harriet Tubman Project.
okay.
So I think he is the best person to answer
Okay,
any
all right,
questions.
okay.
But just to answer your question, I met him while he was there. I'm
Okay.
quite young, so I only met him about 4 years ago. And I started doing this work because I am also a real estate agent.
Okay.
And I wanted to be very impactful about the real estate work that I'm doing and helping people that are transitioning with housing. So I was helping some returning citizens with housing, and I was introduced to Fuquan because I had this grand idea of helping people with home ownership opportunities before they are released. And when he introduced me to the Harriet Tubman Project, it just blew my mind what he's been doing behind the wall and just how brilliant he is. So you guys are actually going to get an opportunity to hear directly from the mind that created this.
Put it on speakerphone.
You might want to have a personal introduction.
Security. You may
Okay.
start the conversation now.
Fuquan, you're on the radio.
So be polite, brother.
Welcome to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. I don't know how much you know about this broadcast, but it's a broadcast that is actually produced and paid for by the Minority Police Officers Association, which I am the former president, as well as Dr. Bradley. But you know, we're open here. We're about the community. We're about giving back. We're about working with, and so we appreciate Ms. Fonseca coming in and enlightening us on this. And we actually said to her that what we've learned, we want to be part of the solution, not the problem. So we appreciate what you're doing there. But we want to find out from you and our listening audience, how can we help those of us who are out here?
Please introduce yourself, Fuquan.
Nah, peace. I appreciate all within it listening ear. So my honorable name is, Ricky McGee. That's the name that was honorably given to me by my mother and father. But when I was in the process of self-discovery, I realized I need to name me in alignment to how I see me, and that's where Fuquan came. And just reimagining myself in the context of what I was prior to that enlightenment and that elevation. And this happened in 1997. So I was convicted of a wrongful arrest that transpired in 1997. And when I came in the system in 1998, they sentenced me to life, right? And when someone takes possession of your life, that's something that you take seriously. So
Absolutely.
being frustrated at the process, I turned my angst into activism, where I began to learn the system. Why was this allowed? Like, why have we become so desensitized to remove or upend me, primarily at that time, from the community and put me in an actual detention center for the rest of my life, right? So I needed to understand the criminal law system. I needed to understand how it intersected with my dehumanization. And this began my literacy, going into the library, tearing up books, building with some of the older heads in the system that's been around. Like, I was on an exploratory search. Never got caught up with the prison system. My mind was centered on figuring this out. Why was I so disposable? And in the midst of it, obviously I was a young guy coming in, 19, 20 years old. I began to create a reputation for myself as someone that was learned in these areas of criminal law reform. Just one of the many areas that I studied. So I started mentoring, counseling, and being an advocate for multiple people throughout the various institutions I was in. And, as a result, it accumulated to me being a part of so many different transformative groups within the Department of Correction. And this one that we're on now, the Harriet Tubman Project, started in 2021 because I was thinking about how many people were leaving prison, but they're not really empowered to create agency of coming to get those that they spent decades with behind. And I'm just thinking about Harriet Tubman, how not only did she gain her freedom, but she felt so compelled to come back and get those who was, in that condition. She couldn't forget the condition that she upended herself from. And she came back and obviously got thousands of others out of slavery in a myriad of different ways. And I felt like we needed that type of philosophy, not only just teaching people about the law, but empowering them to come back and get 2 or 3 more, right? But I knew we needed to create some agency around that, and that's what the Harriet Tubman Project is. So not only do we educate those with the law, we educate family members, friends, loved ones with the law, but also how to be an advocate to come get loved ones who a lot of us are unjustly incarcerated, right? And when it's said, it's laughed at, like, well, everyone in there didn't commit, but what happens when you can prove it? Like, and when citizens are actually funding the institutions that are attempting to suppress your ability to unearth the allegations that you're raising. And there's generally no platforms for this, even though the citizens are paying for it. So we at the Harriet Tubman Project are not only educating those who have been compromised by the system, but those who presently oversee it, without truly being cognizant of their obligations to upend the corruption that is systemic within it. So at the core, that's primarily what we do, and a little bit of background about myself.
Well, first let me say thank you for being so upfront with it and sharing such a personal situation, and your fiance here for coming in here and advocating, because a lot of times people run from anything they think is challenging. But I think it's important that, and I'm going to speak for Dr. Bradley, I'm going to speak for Rhodes as well, including myself, is that if we can see the Orange Man release people who are convicted, who admitted to crimes, we should be out there supporting, helping to make sure that if people have been convicted of a crime like yourself, that is actually what happened, right? And so we shouldn't be afraid to challenge the system that we're part of. We've been part of, I was a police officer almost 40 years. And we see the disparity as well. Even if the crime is committed, is how it is being dealt with, right? In certain neighborhoods, you know, that kid may have committed a very heinous crime, but he gets to go home because he's connected in some ways. And I'm not saying that that should be the case, but if not handed out equally. So we have to be cognizant and taking ownership of that. So again, you explained a lot. Well, those of us are, how can we help your fiance and others who are working with this to make sure that, hey, if it is what it is, we have to pay our debt to society. But as you said, when you get out, because I'm curious, what was your education level when you were incarcerated? Because I think that's important. Because I worked in the schools for the police department. Dr. Bradley was in charge of safety and climate in Randolph high schools and Randolph school system, and we know there's a direct correlation between education and the likelihood of you getting caught up in the system. And if you do, you don't know how to defend yourself.
Yeah, so for me, my education, well, I'm a proud, alum of Madison Park High School. I love that school in Roxbury, Massachusetts, but I didn't graduate.
Okay.
I dropped out of high school after 12th grade, and it's a decision that, I always regretted. Eventually got my GED the first few months when I came upstate in 1998, but I have a GED. There was many opportunities for me to get a college education in prison, but I've been so passionate about developing my own sense of literacy because, they say in order to do something you've never done, you must be someone you've never been. So I had to will the type of mentality that I needed in order to fight this particular fight. And I felt going to college didn't provide me with that particular literacy that I needed in order to challenge a system, right? I think school teaches you to challenge an economy and different things, well, the classes that they were teaching, to find a job and develop a career, but I was striving to challenge a system. So I had to create that type of literacy for myself. So I take pride in the fact that I'm self-taught, self-learned, with the assistance of so many different ancestors whose books I read, who gave me a great literacy of the system, who were pretty much my educators, like George Jackson and James Baldwin and Malcolm X. Their writings became really the pillars of my present education. So from a formal standpoint, I dropped out of the 9th grade and I got a GED, but I see my literacy well beyond that.
No, and we in our audience, and we can hear it in you, and that's what I say. You were looking at some of the figures that your fiance provided to us on the, and I thought it was much lower on the cost of incarcerating people. It's way more than any college degree in most institutions here, and there's really no financial benefit for having people there indefinitely. For crimes, it almost makes no sense, and I think that's why I say the education on this end, Dr. Bradley, folks, is if taxpayers really, because I thought it was way less than this. I thought it was around $60,000 to house someone, that it would be cheaper for us to have you out here and pay you half of this just to be walking around than to be spending $200,000 in some instances here and close to $100,000 in most cases for housing someone. And most people come out of there worse than when they came in. And my other question quickly for you is, how are you able to communicate this with younger people who are coming into the system? Because sadly, that has not stopped, because we all think it won't happen to us until it does.
Yeah, so, there's a general philosophy that I do this work in the imaging and enlightenment, and it's called Know Your Smoke, right? So when guys come in here, they're from different neighborhoods. They usually here for a firearm offense, a violent offense, and most of it is directed to a neighborhood directly adjacent to theirs, right? And the inquiry is, why would you be willing to die based on issues that you got with someone that lives a corner around you, or a street next to you, or a project adjacent to yours, right? And trying to give these guys a literacy, like, is that your smoke, or is it the entities that created that systemic area of poverty that deprived resources that ultimately took the life of so many different people? And when I say that, they're like, what do you mean, like our environment was engineered or redlined, and concentrated areas of poverty were developed, and law enforcement pretty much centered their entity where there was an economy based on that divisiveness and that tribalism. They'll give me another second to explain it, and after a while they're hooked. They're like, you know what, we could put our differences aside to focus on an issue larger than our internal beef. Yes, I got issues with them, but how can we come together to deal with the systemic things that actually engineered our community? And with that comes like civic engagement. And because we have institutions, whether it be the African American Coalition Committee, whether it be the Harriet Tubman Project, whether it be our reach in the community, they know that we're not just talking in jail, like we're actually organizing around the very things that we're speaking about. And we're not just speaking about it within ourselves. We're meeting with district attorneys, we're meeting with state reps, we're meeting with federal legislators, we're writing federal legislation, we're writing state legislation. And when they see that, they kind of impressed that guys that came from their background have this literacy without compromising their identity, right?
Yeah.
And that's the pull. And that's what I try to use. That's what I try to capitalize upon, putting our differences aside, looking at larger systemic issues that created our micro problems towards each other. And it's been, a great blueprint.
So, Dr. Bradley, because I'm listening to what he's saying, this would be a great class for you. Dr. Bradley teaches at several colleges, and I see in his face. How do we inform students who may be looking in, because you teach criminal justice as part of your courses? How do we incorporate something like what Jaquan is saying?
Well, I'm actually saying, first of all, I want to say to this young man, and I hope he can hear me clear. He
sounds like a college professor.
You're far beyond a high school dropout. Right. Far beyond it. I know people at my academic level who don't even remotely think the way you're thinking. Right. And I think you have hit the nail on the head, with this whole issue around dealing with the systemic issues that cause us, right? And I often tell my students this: if Hitler would have allowed the Jews to kill themselves, he wouldn't have been charged with trying to exterminate the Jews. You see what I mean? And that's what's happening in our system. They're promoting the killing, the violent community. Yes. So therefore, it can smooth their models. So that's it. So how did I do this? I'm sitting here, and I'm actually teaching a research writing course, and over the summer, and I'm thinking here, wow, I can use this information. How can I use this information to actually get people to think about what you're doing to destroy a demographic of people in our society? So he's right on target. Man, I would really love to sit down one day and just talk with you.
Come up here
I'm serious.
Visit if possible.
Yeah, the fact that you have actually dropped out of high school and educated yourself in this way is absolutely mind-blowing.
Well, the thing is, I've seen kids that I've worked in a set, and Madison Park is not the same, who graduate and they can't read, right? And they've got their diploma, they can't even read what's on it. And to hear you articulate this is why I think it's important. I always say the best lesson is the one we teach ourselves, but I think the best lesson sometimes is when we teach others. And I think you'd be someone that, and let us be the vessel to get it out, because we know you don't have the freedom to move around like we do, but it doesn't mean that your voice is locked up.
Exactly. You may be physically, but your voice
right. So we want to be part of the solution, is what we're saying to you. And these are law enforcement people.
Yeah. And
And the challenge with that, because I did hear ways that we can help and you can assist. A lot of what I realize about the criminal law system is that there's so many different relationships, so many different political relationships, whether with law enforcement, district attorneys. Like it's a small circle of people that actually have each other's back. And when certain allegations are made with different officers,
we shy away.
There's, they call it like a blue wall of silence from a criminal law standpoint, but there's also district attorneys that have actually soiled convictions. You got multiple people out there who are actually home because the district attorney suppressed exculpatory evidence 20, 30 years ago, right? But they're still in the photo ops with our community leaders. They're still, part of that criminal law system that young adults are currently going through. There's no account, right? And it's just having the fortitude to say, listen, what you did 20, 30 years ago, there has to be some account of that, because yes, this guy's home. They probably threw him $4 or $5 million, and they evaluated his worth, and that stands to that. But why do you still get to roam our community with no consequences, right? Whether the community holds you accountable, you begin to air out some of the things you've done in the past, right? Because a lot of the stuff that's going to get thrown out in my case when I do have my evidentiary hearing is going to target a lot of the officers that people know, right? But that's when I'm able to see what size people are going to be.
Well, they have
is it
that
friendship or is it principle?
Right. They have that statute there, the justice blind. Do you mind? Hold on. Do you mind taking a call? We have a call on the line. Do you mind taking a call?
No.
Okay. Caller. Good morning. Welcome to the round table.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm just listening to you all. This is Priscilla. That young man that's on the phone, I believe that he actually did some work with Nika Elugado when she was the state rep. And I find that a lot of young men that go to prison, they learn when they're in there, and they come out with a purpose and a plan and a mission. And it's just sad that a lot of our men are incarcerated falsely. And the issue with the building another woman's prison, that's in $50 million. That just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so he caught the tail end of it. So he would, but the gist of what she was saying, Jaquan, is that a lot of young men go into prison and they're educated there, and it's sad that that's where they have to get what you're learning. All the education that you've gotten, sadly, has been behind the walls where it can't do the most benefit, right?
Well, what facility is he in?
MCI Norfolk.
He's an NCI Norfolk. What we talking about here?
$79,000.
$79,992. $90,092. I'm sorry. $79,090.92 per person times the amount of people that are there. If you use that budget, you can send this young man to school and other men to school.
Well, she was saying they're talking about looking for another $50 million to build another prison, right?
I mean,
we can't build high schools in the city.
This blows my mind. And so my question is, what is the reason behind? I know the reason. I know it's a rhetorical question. Yes. You know what I mean? But we as people must ask our politicians, why are you putting this money here? Why are you actually putting this kind of money into incarceration as opposed to education?
Right. But he also gave us a challenge that I'm willing to take on. He's right when he said about us that blue wall, right? And we've always taken that on, Dr. Bradley, where we call balls and strikes. And I told him when I was president of MAMLEO, if you are responsible for your behavior, you have to be held accountable for it. But it has to be across the board.
It's got to be the same way.
It can't be like, well, we're just not going to get involved because our team is up to bat and we know that they shouldn't be. What they've done is wrong. If the officer was wrong in what they did, or the DA's office be held accountable. That's why when we have elections, we want to make sure that we have DAs in there that are looking at the facts, not whether or not someone's going to be on the other side who did something wrong. We don't need wrong law enforcement because the authority that you have as a police officer, that's the beginning of this before you get in front of the court.
Well, what we have to also do in this society is get away from the idea that our criminal justice system is to keep people of color in order.
Yeah.
You know, the criminal justice people for the criminals,
Right.
like the one that's in the White House. All right, I mean,
Victims
it's for the
don't.
criminals. It's not for a particular demographic and keeping them in order.
Right. So Priscilla, how do we get? Because I know today they're having a graduation. She's with the Marcus Anthony Hall Institution. They deal with young people. How do we get our young people civically engaged with the program you're doing? Incorporate something like what they're doing with the Harriet Tubman into that program, having her come and speak to the young people. I think she'd be great, and as well as being able to then plug in her fiance, so these young people can hear from somebody who's really impacted by this, family that's impacted by this. Priscilla?
Right. So yes, we are having our graduation, our 5th cohort, today at Roxbury Community College between 1 and 3. And basically what we are trying to do at Marcus Anthony is to educate our youth, teach them about civic engagement, get them involved with campaigns, get them involved with ballot questions. We take them to City Hall and to the State House. We take them to protest. We let them see how they feel, because our young folks are dealing with a whole lot of stuff. And the only way we're going to keep them out of that system is to have programs like Marcus Anthony Hall. And so the fact that they want to continue to build prisons instead of building schools. I mean, they're closing our schools. They're turning them into condos. I mean, it just, but the budget for the school department continues to go up. But half the kids aren't even. So there's clearly a problem within our system, city, state, and federal.
So we've got a
And
couple.
so we are the people, and we have the power.
Right.
So we have to do something. We can't just keep sitting down watching things happen to
Is
us.
he back on?
It's insane.
Okay. So I want to let him give, because we got only like literally 3 minutes. I want to give him a chance to respond if he's been able to hear what you said.
Fuquan.
Sorry.
What was the question again? Because the phone was in and out.
The question was, she has an organization that she runs, the Marcus Anthony Hall. Young man who was murdered here in Boston in a barbershop while his son was there. She started the civic engagement, and how do we get our young people through the programs that she's doing plugged into what you're doing there, so they're more well informed, so that they can kind of be ambassadors out here, getting your message out to young people to avoid, not saying you didn't, to avoid the situation and what they need to do if they do happen to be caught up in it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I learned about this dealing with a lot of young adults is those that deal with the advocacy of striving to give them alternatives, is that there's a fear component, right? Where there's a disconnect with the literacy that is required in order to penetrate the minds of these young adults. And when you don't reach them the first time, second time, or third time, we may see, you know what, man, they just ain't trying to hear it. And in their mind, they may look at it and say, well, damn, I'm disposable. You don't got no time for me no more. And that feeds into the narrative that they're worth nothing, right? They don't have a voice, like they don't have an identity. They don't have a humanity. And I think when you build a culture of speaking to them every time you see them, and it may take 50 times, because I wasn't, who I am now when I was in the streets, and I had people trying to reach me. But for those that were committed to it and try to stay with me and called me at 2 in the morning and 3 in the morning to make sure I was good, those are the people that I don't forget, right? And sometimes it's more than just the literacy to get at these young adults. We have to create a culture of love and support and empathy first before they can start to listen to anything, because everybody's telling them to stop doing something, from their mother on to their teachers, to their basketball coaches, and there's just no listening to that. But what are we doing different? What are we doing contrary to what everyone around them is already normalized? And I think just simple empathy, being there, support them, being non-judgmental, and give them a platform to listen to what their anxieties are and their issues are, just creates the foundation where they'll begin to learn to listen so that they can ultimately listen to learn.
All right, Fuquan, that's a great way to end. We've got to run, but we definitely want to have you back. We definitely want to have your fiance back. We want to keep this dialogue going. We appreciate you taking the time this morning, and we look forward to working with you. It'd be an honor to meet you, honestly. We'd love to see if we can set that up as well. Folks, you've been listening to At the Round. Thank you. You've been listening to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. Dr. Bradley?
Be blessed.
Amen.
Hey, listen,
Thank you.
Pudge.
I got unreleased songs for days, they don't want it. Eat any MC in the game. It ain't a challenge if your music reflects who you are, then you's a coward. I can see through the lies you ain't living what you spitting. If your money's so long, why your dog's in prison? Why your baby mom's stripping, why your mom's still living in that same broken home that you used to sell piffin'. You ain't gotta lie to me to sell me a track. You ain't gotta rock fake jewels or walk around strapped. I respect artists getting money, but love them for spitting crack. And the fact that one track can move a family out the trap. It's a dream for us lost souls brought up in the mix. I'm motivated by the artists coming out in my midst. And the artists that paved the way when I didn't exist. Music's a skyscraper, I'm just trying to add a couple bricks.
This is for the dreamers. They say I am a dreamer. Cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard. Hustle real hard, hustle so if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya. No, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog.
I always dreamed I'd be on tour.